Good evening, everybody. And this is the sixth edition of Cannabis Thinking Talks. My name is Alex Lucena, and I'm the head of innovation for the Green Hub. Before I introduce our special guest tonight, I'll just quickly go around the room for quick introductions. For the first time with us, Viviane Cedola, thank you so much for coming. Viviane is an entrepreneur, is the opinion former here in Brazil, and she is the CEO for Dr. Cannabis, which is a company that, for those who have never had a contact, Google it up. You'll see the great things that Dr. Cannabis have been doing here in our country in the cannabis sector. So Viviane, thanks a lot for being here. Again.
Thank you, Alex.
Yes. Our partner, Daniel Jordan for Portal Sechats, Brazil's top leading news vehicle in the cannabis field. Daniel, always a pleasure to being with you. Thanks for being with us again.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. The same.
And of course, my buddy here and my associate partner, Marcelo Greco, founder for the Green Hub, and a specialist within the cannabis sector. Marcelo.
Nice
we are,
here again.
Again, yes. So our guest tonight is Alfredo Pascual. Alfredo is an analyst for the MJBizDaily, a publisher, well-known publisher, one of the main publishers around the world in the cannabis industry, communicating with entrepreneurs, communicating with investors all over the world. Alfredo, we know you're a Latin America specialist, so and you're from Uruguay as well. So this is a Latin America session, okay? It's a pleasure having you. Great having you in our program. Welcome to Brazil. And I'll pass the ball to you, as we say in football, right? With for your initial remarks. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your role in the MJBizDaily news. And again, welcome. Let's go for it.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here. And before I start talking about myself or MJBizDaily, I'm also very happy to reconnect with industry friends here. And Marcelo is probably one of my first contacts in the Brazilian cannabis industry. We met personally, how many years ago? 3 years ago, I think it was.
3 years ago, exactly.
I think even more than 3 years ago at a conference in Sao Paulo that I will never forget, because it was a conference about medical cannabis where the majority of the audience was from the pharmaceutical industry. And I've never seen something like that elsewhere, anywhere since then. So that was very interesting. In 2017, I won't forget. Viviane, another good friend from Brazil, excellent source for MJBizDaily several times, so it's a pleasure to be here with you. And Daniel, also a pleasure to be here with you. We don't know each other personally, but I obviously know Sechad, and I've been featured also in your website, and I appreciate the work that you do in Brazil as well. So yeah, thanks for having me here among these Brazilian experts. And yeah, so about myself, for those listening or seeing this program that do not know me, my role is to be international analyst for MJBizDaily. MJBizDaily is how Marijuana Business Daily is usually called. So the company is from Colorado, and but what I do particularly is to dedicate most of my working time to research and write about legal international cannabis markets and the regulations, the regulatory frameworks that allow business opportunities. So that's the key for us. What are business opportunities that different legal markets, cannabis markets around the world allow? And where I focus is in Europe and Latin America. So those are like my true areas of expertise, I would say. And particularly medical cannabis. I do not do that much of hemp and the industrial uses of hemp, but I do everything that is related with medical cannabis, regardless of the THC level. If CBD is sold under prescription, that is, for me, important. It is something that I cover, and that's why I've been covering Brazil since 2018. That was when I joined MJBizDaily. I first started writing some freelance articles, but since October 2018, I work full-time for MJBizDaily. Exclusively, obviously, I do not do any consultancy or anything of the sort. For us, it is extremely important that we remain an independent publication in the industry, an objective voice. And yeah, I've been writing extensively about Brazil. And also for those who do not know Marijuana Business Daily, we also produce a family of B2B trade shows, including the world's largest, the MJBizCon, which is held in Las Vegas every year. Obviously, these are different times, but I recommend whenever possible that anyone interested in the cannabis industry, international cannabis industry, whenever they have the possibility of going to Vegas to MJBizCon, to go there, because it's a unique experience. It's really unique. And yeah, so obviously MJBizDaily started covering the United States markets, which is sort of where it all began with the legal cannabis industry. But then since 2017, particularly 2018 with Canada, the company expanded coverage internationally. And yeah, that's when I joined them. And what I do is to, as I said before, research and write about the business opportunities in the cannabis industry, particularly in Europe and Latin America.
Alfredo, before I call Marcelo, I mean, for our first question, how many readers are we talking about? Can you give us a sense of your followers, readers? I don't know how you classify.
Well, it's thousands of readers. Of course, it depends. The majority of them are still in the US, right? And that makes sense because I always find it important to clarify that when we talk about the global cannabis industry, it's still mostly United States. Anything outside the United States, even if we include Canada, it is still relatively small, even including Canada, revenue-wise at least. So obviously, readership is expanding more rapidly internationally in terms of how much it is growing, like from countries like Germany, Brazil, and even China, right? Like China is one of the fastest growing countries for us in terms of readership, but it's still pretty small when compared to the US. When it comes to particular numbers, I do not really handle them. Those are mostly for sales department, which I do not have much to do because we strictly separate editorial from sales. But obviously, if anyone is interested in knowing more precisely the outreach of MJBizDaily, you can reach out to me and I can forward that to our sales team, or reach out to sales directly and they will let you know.
No problem, no problem. We'll look it up. Marcelo, would you like to kick off the interview, please?
Of course. So nice to be with you again. Like you said, we met back in 2017 when everything was in the beginning in Brazil. It's still very new, but you've been following since the beginning. Of course.
That is true.
Yeah.
And you know what, Marcelo, allow me to interrupt you with something funny. So now, obviously, the industry is completely different internationally, right? And everyone thinks that the discussion about cultivation in Brazil started yesterday. Not everyone, but many people, especially outside of Brazil, think that the discussion around cultivating in Brazil started yesterday. But as everyone here knows, that is not true. And I remember that conference in 2017 when Anvisa was clarifying that cultivation is already legal, right? So it's still, they don't have the rules to give out licenses, and a bunch of secondary legislation is needed, or regulations are needed. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's been, yeah, exactly.
Cultivation is not new.
Exactly. It's been around for a while. Of course, Anvisa still doesn't want to discuss that or be involved with that. And now we have other people discussing that. We have the Congress and the Senate, and that's good because it's going to accelerate things. But Anvisa's been doing a good job so far, giving the access to the mothers that started back in 2014. Needed to give the medications to their kids, and that's how everything started in Brazil. And that's how even the Green Hub started, looking into that and how we could have that, make that happen. So you've been following that since the 335, that the RDC 335 that gave that access. It was the 17/15 known before, but now it's the 335. Last December, we started working on the RDC 327. Other companies.
Last December, it was approved. It was
approved. Yeah, It was approved in December, last December, and you've been following that too. And now, like you said, we're bringing back to the table the cultivation,
but away from Anvisa.
But away from Anvisa, exactly, bringing other players to the table and bringing the agriculture side of cannabis, bringing the other all the potential of cannabis to the table. That I think I always thought it could contribute to our local market. I think with that we can actually we can really grow with cannabis. But how do you see Brazil working its way to a more expanded regulation in cannabis with all those ways of working? You know, I want to see your opinion to the stakeholders and to the politicians. You know, how could you compare that to other countries in Latin America and even other countries in Europe? And how do you see Brazil working its way?
Well, that's a very open question. Let's start on a general level. And I would say a unique way, because the way that it has been developing in Brazil is not a copy paste from another country. And we've seen that internationally. We've seen never a textual copy paste, but we've seen that certain countries regulate medical cannabis largely inspired by what another country did before. And I would say that in the case of Brazil so far, it's very unique to Brazil and the situation in Brazil and the different pathways that we will discuss in more detail, I guess, in which the different regulations are evolving. But still, there are some things that where you can draw comparisons. And for example, the fact that, again, talking on a general level, it's been the courts, the judicial system, what has been pushing for reform in Brazil and pushing the legislative and the executive as well to allow ever more broader medical cannabis access. I would say in Brazil, without the court cases, we wouldn't be where we are today, right? And that is not unique to Brazil. That has happened in many places, in the US, in several states, in Canada, even in Germany. Many people do not know that the current law in Germany, the amendment that was done in early 2017, broadening medical cannabis access, which was approved by unanimity in the parliament, was not because politicians were trying to be nice. It was because they were trying to avoid homegrowing being granted by the courts in Germany. I mean, not only because of that, obviously all these processes are complex and do not have a very simple explanation, but without the courts, that wouldn't have happened in Germany as well. So that's where I draw the comparison that courts are usually the ones pushing for reform in these things. And I would say one more comparison can be done with Germany, and it is the fact that Anvisa has been granting exceptional authorizations, because it's thousands of authorizations, 15, 20,000, whatever the number is by now, but it's still supposed to be exceptional authorizations. It is not something that is supposed to be normal, let's say, or at least not the standard way of accessing to medicines in Brazil. And I started talking about this in early 2019, saying that was going to be unsustainable, because you cannot have the bureaucracy to grant exceptional authorizations forever if these are growing exponentially into the thousands in a country that has a 200+ million population. And that sort of happened in Germany as well. So I talked about the courts granting home grow permits in Germany, which were only one or two, I don't remember right now. There were not that many, but the equivalent of Anvisa in Germany, the B-Farm, also before the reform in Germany in 2017, started granting, again, exceptional authorizations for patients to access to medical cannabis in Germany. And that number ended up being about 1,000 patients when the law amendment was done. And about half of these, about 500, were granted in the year before the law amendment in Germany. So again, legislators realized that the number of exceptional authorizations was growing rapidly and that it was not sustainable to have a system like that forever. So that will also influence the new legislation in Germany. And I hope and expect that will also motivate legislators in Brazil now to consider and approve the current bill that would not only allow cultivation in Brazil, but also would expand access and include cannabis in the health system.
I remember just bringing something. I remember back that Germany had the same problem we're having since you need a prescription, there was only a few doctors willing to prescribe. Is that still a problem in Germany, or is that sorted out? You have more doctors prescribing cannabis?
It definitely improved. You cannot compare the situation in Germany in 2020 with the situation in 2017 when the law was approved. That back then it was not that easy to get a doctor. It was also not that easy to get product, and now it is. Now shortages are the exception, not the norm. But yeah, that's a problem everywhere, right? And I always remind companies and people in the industry that it's never enough to have a law approved. Then if the bottleneck is going to be the doctors, you're still going to be in problems to have generalized access to medical cannabis. And obviously every company says, yes, but we will educate the doctors, but that is not easy. It is really not easy. You guys know that better than I do because you've been trying to do that in Brazil as well.
Yes.
And it's a really tough job.
Yeah, and the endocannabinoid system is not taught in the medical schools in general, right? So it's a new science for the doctors.
Yeah,
So
but on a positive note, I would say that in Germany today, and again, it depends. There might be doctors in Germany that do not want to have to hear anything about this. But in general, I would say medical cannabis, not recreational, that's another thing, but medical cannabis became normalized in the medical community in Germany. And yes, of course, there are many doctors that will say, there's not enough evidence. I only want to prescribe products for which I know that clinical trials were done for that specific product to treat a specific condition, and that the quality and efficacy of that specific product was approved. But I do not see many doctors saying, I do not want to prescribe medical cannabis because it's a drug and macoña and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So that definitely decreased a lot in Germany, the stigma around medical cannabis. The efficacy issue, that's another one. So it's two separate things with doctors, right? So one is the stigma, right? This is a drug, I don't want to prescribe a drug, an illegal drug. But the other one is the efficacy issue. And in Germany today, at least from it's just my anecdotal experience and the people that I know I speak to, the stigma thing is not really a huge issue anymore. At least it decreased substantially. Efficacy is still a problem.
I see. Well, since we're talking about doctors, let me turn this conversation here to Viviane. Viviane is obviously in touch with many Brazilian doctors on a daily basis. So can you please step in the talks here? Welcome.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I still have a question on this subject because, well, in Brazil, we do still have stigma. We have like 1,000 doctors prescribing in a universe of more than 400,000 doctors who are allowed to do so, but they don't know how to do it. They haven't been educated and so on. But once
Isn't it also a thing in Brazil that the Conselho Federal de Medicina is not really supportive of this?
Yes, it is. It is, and the Conselho.
So it is a thing. It is a problem, right?
It is a thing. It is a problem.
It is an issue.
Yes, they do not support, and when they are asked to step in, they kind of bring more barriers than opportunities. Let's put it that way. So. Cannabis movement hasn't really been working along with CFM, as we call them, the Federal Medicine Council. And yes, my question is, when it comes to not only efficacy, but medical interaction and, well, how to prescribe, dosage is not something easy to do in cannabis. Well, it's not regular, like it's not like prescribing Tylenol or something that's in drugstores. So even though doctors in Germany may not have stigma anymore, do you believe they know how to prescribe? Are they feeling confident doing so?
Again, I really cannot speak for the German doctors, right? Because I do not know them all, and I haven't seen any reliable large-scale survey of doctors to say, according to this data, this is the situation. But I can say a couple of things. So first, that I've seen doctors' education in Germany, what a couple of companies have been doing externally, because it is only done for doctors, but I've seen the materials that they use and the way that they present those materials. And I can say that it was very good, really responsible, and not about can prescribe my product. It was about really educating the doctors in the sense of what the law in Germany allows them to do. So if you want to prescribe medical cannabis in Germany, it is a little bit special because it can only be prescribed for serious conditions. And if you want reimbursement, you need to justify certain things. And obviously, many doctors are not really aware of exactly how the law works and how they should do for the patient to get reimbursement. So there are companies really helping the doctors understand how they need to make the application for reimbursement for health insurance coverage. And just to give more context, in Germany, normally for, let's say, a normal medicine that is covered by insurance, doctors don't need to do anything special. They issue the prescription, and if it is a medicine that is normally covered by insurance, the patient goes to the pharmacy, pays 5, 10 euros, and gets the medicine regardless of the real price of the medicine, which is covered by insurance. In the case of medical cannabis, it is not that easy because first, there are certain conditions that need to be fulfilled, and second, an application is done. So the doctor needs to, and patient, they need to submit something to insurance, and the insurer will review that and say, okay, this fulfills what the law mandates, so we are gonna cover, or not. Maybe the application is incomplete, or maybe there's a debate whether the condition is serious enough or not to be covered by medical cannabis, or if there is enough evidence for that cannabis may help. It doesn't need to be proved that cannabis helps, it needs to be proved that cannabis may help. So in any case, it is not as straightforward as it is to prescribe any medicine, any other medicine in Germany. So doctors do need some help going through that process, and I've seen really good education in that regard, helping doctors do that. Then there's another thing, and that is also something that doesn't help the prescription of medical cannabis, and it is that when the law was amended in Germany, part of the law mandates that a doctor's survey be done, in which doctors need to collect certain anonymized information and submit that to authorities after 1 year of treatment or after the treatment is interrupted. And obviously, doctors do not, nobody, but especially doctors who are really busy, especially these days, they do not like to fill out extra forms, right? So that is another thing that it is not an incentive to prescribe medical cannabis. So there are certain, I don't want to say difficulties, but extra steps that doctors need to consider if they want to prescribe any medical cannabis. And for that, I've seen really good doctors' education. And as I said before, the number of doctors prescribing in 3 years ago compared with now is completely different. And I do not have like a real number. I don't think anyone does because of privacy laws in Germany. It is not that easy to know how many doctors exactly are prescribing cannabis. But from what you see here from patients and the medical cannabis community in general, there has been a really good improvement.
Nice.
Yanni, I believe that was your follow-up. Do you have another question for Alfredo before
Yes,
I pass
I do.
Daniel?
I do,
Yes,
sure.
go ahead.
So, well, Brazil is opening. I guess that's been on the headlines of cannabis worldwide. And because, of course, we're a huge population, 200 million people. And yes, many companies from all over the world, cannabis companies, are looking to pushing their products to Brazil. I guess my colleagues, just like myself, are receiving many messages in their inboxes like, how can I put my products there? Where do I start by? How do you believe that these companies have the actual figure or the actual how bureaucratic the process can be to be in Brazil, or do they believe that it's very easy, I'll just go there and thrive in the new market? How do you believe the world is seeing Brazil? I mean, from your journalist perspective, not only Germany, but worldwide.
Yeah. In other words, as a foreigner, are we as sexy as we believe we are here in Brazil from an outside perspective? Sexy in the market terms.
Yeah, well, Brazil is big, right? So it's hard not to say that Brazil is big, but that's very easy to say. Obviously, 200 million plus population, Brazil is going to be big. So let's reply to that in a couple of different ways. So I think there's still a lot of confusion outside of Brazil around what the Brazilian regulations currently allow. And many companies confuse the fact that they can ship products to individual patients under the, let's say, call them the old regulations that are still valid today and will be valid in the future as well, with the new rules created by Anvisa in December 2019. And when those two things start to get confused, it is really hard to have a conversation. I think it is very important to separate that. And that's what I always try to do in my reporting, to clarify that we're talking about two different things here. So one is the so-called compassionate use. I know it's not the official name, but it's how it is usually called in the region. And another one is the rules that Anvisa created in December 2019 for these sanitary authorizations. And Viviana, you mentioned that, like, the paperwork and how hard it really is to actually get product to the market in Brazil. And I would say then it depends, right? It depends what you want to do. What do you want to do? Do you want to register a product, not register, but get a sanitary authorization with Anvisa under the rules created in December 2019? That's going to be extremely hard. And there's a reason why only one company has been able to do that, and why as of July 2020, Anvisa replied to me that they do not have any single application to process. It is not Anvisa's fault. It is the fault of the companies that do not comply with the requirements and get new products to the market. You could say, okay, the rules are very complicated. That is true. The rules are the pharmaceutical rules, with the exception of proving efficacy temporarily. But then when it comes to quality, it's basically the usual pharmaceutical rules. And obviously, many cannabis companies around the world cannot comply with that, at least not immediately, because they were created in jurisdictions in which medical cannabis has its special rules, different from the typical medicines. And then, for instance, in Canada, it is rare to have stability data. And I'm not talking about the stability data for the Brazilian temperature and humidity. I'm talking about stability data in general, right? So the Canadian companies that sell medical cannabis, they do not need that. It is not required by the Canadian regulations. And I remember a GMP seminar here in Germany, where German inspectors that usually go to Canada to inspect facilities were laughing that Canadians call medical cannabis something that has no expiry date, right? So obviously for a company like that one, it's going to be really challenging to go to Brazil and have a product authorized by Anvisa with stability data done for Brazil, right? So it is challenging. That is complicated, and that's the reason why there's only one. But then the interesting thing about Brazil is that it allows different opportunities, I would say. So one is this one, the complicated one. And being complicated has the advantage of having fewer competitors. Today, only one. But then, if you cannot comply with that, or at least you cannot comply with that today, you have other options, which is shipping product to individual patients that receive the Anvisa authorization. For that, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, it is not rocket science. At least when it comes to the quality of the product, you don't need to prove anything. You just basically need to prove that you have a legal company producing legally in some country and then ship to individual patients. Obviously, it is inefficient not being able to ship in bulk. And it is inefficient and complicated for a company that is not in Brazil to have a Brazilian doctor know that that product exists in what I would say is a crowded market already, right? Because you have a lot of different products being shipped to individual patients in Brazil. But it's a good thing, right? So there are two different types of ways you can generate revenue in Brazil today. And one has very low entry barriers and a lot of competitors in an inefficient market, because bulk imports are on distribution to pharmacies is not allowed. And then you have another one, which is maybe it is too restrictive and it is too complicated. But if you manage to get a sanitary authorization, you will be in a really good position in the Brazilian market. And yeah, so going back to your original question, asking me about how companies see Brazil, the first thing that I realized is that many confuse these two things, right? So Brazil is huge. What is huge, right? So you need to be more precise about what you are talking about, and these two separate pathways of generating revenue in Brazil, and know if your company has the capabilities of complying with the rules created by Anvisa in December 2019, which is what I emphasize in my reporting until December, when many were talking about, okay, now this is going to be a multi-billion market with the new rules by Anvisa, and I was focusing on, okay, it might be, I don't know, but why don't you see the actual rules that are being created, which are quite strict?
Yes. I have an extra comment on that. Since the bar from Anvisa is so high, and that could be seen as good, and we know that many Canadian companies, like you said, and many American companies, they don't have to have the stability and they don't have to work that way. It's more of a wellness product, more compared to food than a medication. And then when you analyze how big can the opportunity in Brazil be, do you think it's going to be easier? Do you think that's going to be good for the CBD market? Because we know that lots of things that come into Brazil by the compassion way they don't have the quality that we actually need. Do you think those international companies are really going to start making their products better in order to explore the European and the Brazilian market? Or do you think that new companies are going to start from scratch locally? Just a comparison to see if, people are going to raise their own bars internationally too, in order to be able to work those international markets.
It's a very good point.
Well, I hope so, right? I cannot speak for other companies, but I mean, there is indeed a big opportunity in Brazil, so why not make the effort? And what you do for Brazil will be useful for other markets with high entry barriers in the future as well, right? So why not doing? The problem is that the cannabis industry, generally speaking, is new in most of the world, and it's crowded with startups that have founders that normally come from, I don't want to be negative with any industry, but they normally come from tech, finance, mining, you name it, but not from the pharmaceutical industry. Like, not many founders of cannabis startups come from the pharmaceutical industry. And yes, they will tell you that they will hire the best pharmaceutical experts. Everyone says that. But in fact, these companies in many countries are not pharma oriented, and you need to be pharma oriented if you want to register a product in Brazil, right? So it is not for everyone. So that's what happens with high entry barriers. But then the opportunity is even bigger.
Well, let's see how this is going to move looking forward.
But one thing, Marcelo, that you mentioned, and we could connect this or not with the bill that is being discussed right now. So already talking about the bill, one thing that drew my attention is that the bill largely ignores the compassionate use pathway access, right? The bill is about cultivation, it's about creating new rules, but it doesn't really fix any of the, what I will call, problems of the compassionate use pathway, the individual Anvisa authorizations, which has some problems. So one, I mentioned it, is the fact that it cannot be imported in bulk. So that's plain stupid. I mean, there might be technical reasons why that would be complicated to do for Anvisa to authorize that, but it's just ridiculous that Brazil has now tens of thousands of patients that need to be importing individually. I mean, it's just good business for the post, for post office. I mean, for nobody else, it's good business. So that is ridiculous. It makes it more expensive, more complicated, and it could be much more accessible for patients and more efficient for companies if bulk imports were allowed. Yeah. And the new bill, maybe for good reasons, doesn't address that, right? It doesn't try to fix that. It tries to create something else, cultivation and SUS and all other things. But I think that should be addressed. Maybe it's because it wants to get away from Anvisa and like, don't touch Anvisa, and then it doesn't address that issue. But it is one issue. And the other one, Marcelo, that you mentioned is the quality of the products, right? And again, I do not want to generalize, because I know that many really good companies are exporting really good products to individual patients in Brazil, but because of what I said before, like, quality requirements are literally non-existent to import individually in Brazil. So that means that at least some products are of really doubtful quality, normally sold as food in the country of origin, without much quality controls. And that is also a problem of individual imports. And the bill also doesn't address that, trying to maybe do two things, allow bulk imports and raise the standards for that. Because you know what, I think that now everyone is talking about the bill, and rightfully so. I think it is a hugely important bill, and I'd be happy to discuss about that with you. But I also think that for the next 2 years, if you are a Brazilian patient, at least in the most positive scenario, for the next 2 years, if you're a Brazilian patient, all that matters to you is individual imports.
Exactly.
Because that's how everyone acts in Brazil. And even if you approve the law by mid next year, in the very most positive scenario after Deputado, Senado, Bolsonaro, and the whole thing, then you need to create secondary rules to say how you're gonna grant licenses, whatever. Then you need to apply for the companies to apply for licenses, start growing, start manufacturing. It's gonna take years until you have
3-4 years. Yeah, exactly. I agree with you.
In the meantime, what do you have? Very strict rules to have autorización sanitaria, sanitary authorization from Anvisa, with only one company being able to register one product. The real access in Brazil, what is the real access? It's the individual imports, the associations working in a gray area other than the ones that have permits from a court, or the individual habeas corpus, or the black market. So that's the reality in Brazil, and it's going to continue being the reality for the next at least 2 years.
The problem I see on that is the gap between both RDCs. And so you have you're giving access to anything on the 335, and then you're making it really hard on the 327. Yeah. So maybe you can have a middle term on both, where we can make things better until we have years from now something going other ways. I agree with you.
Yeah, and again, look, I don't want this to be misinterpreted. I'm not really an insider in the political situation in Brazil, so there might be very good reasons why the new bill ignores Anvisa and these two RDCs that are the current legal ways of accessing to products in Brazil. There might be really good reasons, but as an outsider, I find it's like a lost opportunity that the bill tries to create something really good, but that it's gonna, even in the most positive scenario, it's gonna take years. And in the meantime, what we have in reality is the true Anvisa RDCs, which, as you say, one is too lenient with almost no entry barriers, no quality controls. The other, and the stupidity of not allowing bulk imports. And the other one is quite restrictive and only one CBD product registered.
Exactly.
Well, perhaps it has a lot to do with the agriculture business and the industrial aspect of hemp and all that. But anyways, let's see. I'd like to move on and maybe shift the conversation here, bringing in Daniel. You two guys are news people, and one thing about, in general terms, the news, the media in general has been playing a very significant role here in Brazil in helping break taboos and inform the population in general. Okay, and Seshat's has a lot to do with that. And Daniel, I know, as you said before, the Marijuana Daily Journal was an inspiration for Seshat's when you guys started. So please take it away.
Alfredo, welcome at least virtually to Brazil. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Could you share with us, in your point of view, what is the role of Latin America in the global context of cannabis? And since we are talking about Latin America, could you tell us more of each country, if in your opinion there are differences or main characteristics of each country in Latin America?
Yeah, each one is quite unique. So the continent in general, if you ask the average person in the industry outside of Latin America, what is Latin America in the cannabis industry? The first thing that will come to their mind is, okay, a place to grow cheap and export, right? That's what, being honest, most people associate Latin America with in the cannabis industry. Reality is different, right? And I've been saying this for years, and I emphasize that in the first Latin American report that I published now over a year ago. I recently published the second edition, and I remember when I published the first edition over a year ago that I said Latin America is actually an importer of medical cannabis, and not only Brazil, other countries in Latin America too. They are net importers of medical cannabis or cannabis products from the United States, Europe, elsewhere, Canada, but exports from Latin America are still quite limited, at least from Latin America to other continents, really limited. They are starting, obviously, if you look this in the long term, there are many reasons why you should consider Latin America will be an exporting continent in the cannabis industry. But what interests most cannabis companies today, that accessing to capital is not as easy as it was a couple of years ago, is to generate revenue. And Latin America is a net importer of medical cannabis, especially because of Brazil, but not only because of Brazil. And let's do like a Latin American tour, if you want to call it. And let's go to another big country, Argentina, right? And there are many lessons we can learn from Argentina, but Argentina has a fantastic law with a terrible implementation. And if you read the Argentinian law, it says basically that every patient in need will have access to free medical cannabis. Obviously, that didn't happen. And that's why I always emphasize, and also for the case of Brazil, obviously, I would celebrate if the current bill is approved, but don't think that's the last step. It is not. Having a law is just the first from many steps that you need to go through until you have real access to medical cannabis in the country. Example, Argentina. You have the Argentinian law, what is it, from 2017, I believe, or something like that. And yet, the current situation in Argentina is not really good for patients. Obviously, again, everything is imported, so 100% imported products in Argentina, at least when we talk about legal commercial products. So a net importer of cannabis, and of very limited quantities, because the way that they can import is basically through compassionate use as Brazil, but with a more complex system and not as many patients as Brazil importing. And yes, now the government is discussing about creating new rules and stuff, but these things take time. So as of today, ignoring the new plans in Argentina, the situation is not that good for patients there. And yeah, the law has been there for a couple of years, and it is an importer of cannabis. Then Chile, a country that creates a lot of confusion. Chile does not have like a medical cannabis law or medical cannabis specific framework. It allows medical cannabis medicines to be registered just like any other medicine, proving their efficacy and safety, normally through clinical trials, and registering those with the ISP, Instituto de Salud Pública, I think it's the name in Spanish. But the confusion in Chile is because in the past, the health authority allowed exceptionally the commercialization of two different products at two different times. One was imported, the other one was produced in Chile. That is over now, and there are no legal medical cannabis products that can be prescribed in Chile, at least not commercial products. Then there's the home growing thing. In that sense, for those interested in home growing and association, Chile is a very interesting country. But for companies that want to grow, manufacture medical cannabis products and sell these to patients for them to access to these products in pharmacies via prescription, Chile is not the best place to do that. And if we continue moving to another country, Peru, again, a country with an excellent law, I would say also excellent subsequent regulations, but where things have been developing quite slowly. And now Peru is receiving a lot of attention. Why? Because it's a place where you can export to, and everyone wants to export, and Peru needs to import, so that's why it's receiving a lot of attention. But if you're a patient in Peru today, at the day we are recording this webinar, despite all the press releases and articles that you may have seen about Peru, there's only one product available in only one pharmacy of the country, in Lima. The pharmacy is owned and operated by the government, the DGMID, and the only thing that the pharmacy can offer you is one CBD oil, and that is everything that you can have access to in Peru legally today. So yes, will it get better? Yes. Hopefully very soon, hopefully within maybe days. Maybe when we publish this, the situation is already different in Peru, because a bunch of different things are changing in terms of having more products available, all of this imported. But what I mean with this is it's been evolving very slowly. Again, the Peruvian law is, I believe, from November or at the end of the year in 2017. Almost 3 years later, just one product in one pharmacy and just one CBD oil sold by the government.
Don't forget to mention Don't forget to mention your home country.
Yeah, I will. I'm going north. I'm forgetting Uruguay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Don't forget home.
No. But the good thing in Peru, I don't wanna leave Peru without mentioning it, is that very soon patients will surely have access to both magistral preparations and registered products, all of these imported. And the legislation in Peru allows for the domestic production as well, but no licenses have been issued so far for producing medical cannabis. Okay, let's go to Uruguay before.
In Peru, is it possible to import?
It is possible and necessary because there's no domestic production today in Peru. Even, okay. I mean, they have a beautiful law, the one you want to have in Brazil. Peru already has it since 2017. So in theory, producing in Peru is possible, and eventually, I am sure it will be possible, but these things take time. In the meantime, they need to import. The product that they have available today in this government pharmacy was bought through 2 different supply tenders by the government from a company that imports it from the United States. But soon other companies, and the same company as well, will start offering magistral preparations in pharmacies as well as registered products. Okay, Uruguay. Yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about Uruguay, but we probably don't want to talk that much about the recreational Uruguayan market because that doesn't really apply to Brazil today. At least we are trying to get a medical law approved. Recreational still ages away in Brazil. And when it comes to the domestic medical market in Uruguay, things are good because there are products available for patients, but there's no THC products. So that really sucks, right? Because we still have this thing that is very common in Latin America, that CBD is the good cannabinoid and THC is the bad cannabinoid, the droga, the maconha, THC is the evil. So is that in the Uruguayan law? No, definitely not. The Uruguayan law really doesn't demonize THC at all. But then when it comes to the implementation of the law, somehow we still don't have THC products available in Uruguayan pharmacies, only CBD products. So and Uruguayan law is from 2013. So it's been quite a few years without patients being able to access to THC products in Uruguay.
Why is that? Why is that? I mean, you're allowed recreational, but you can't add THC to your medical. How come?
Look, maybe that is part of the explanation, right? Maybe, unfortunately, maybe patients in need of THC are accessing to their recreational, so-called recreational product that anyone can access to. And then there's not really that much need to pressure to have THC products available. But that would, I mean, that would probably be just a part of the explanation. This is not the explanation. I would say another reason in Uruguay is that the Ministry of Health has been, throughout the years, extremely careful, conservative maybe, in the way they've been interpreting the law. And that probably means that they felt more comfortable approving CBD products first. I don't know. I cannot speak for the Ministry of Health, sure. But that's the situation today. Also in Peru, right? Like why in Peru every company is starting with CBD? Is there a regulatory explanation for that? No. I mean, yes, obviously THC has its difficulties in terms of import-export logistics and all of that. It's a controlled substance and everything. But why the government, I mean, the government in Peru could import THC. Like it's the government. If they cannot import, who can, right? Why they only did a supply tender for CBD? Why is that? It's because of this stigma against THC. And the companies that are expected to start selling products in the next weeks, maybe already is a reality by the time we publish this, are starting with CBD as well. So why are they starting with CBD? Is it that the regulations don't allow THC? No, it is not that. But it is easy to get the signature that you need in whatever government office, if it is for a CBD product than if it is for a THC one. Start with that one, then try to ask for the THC one.
It's a question in Uruguay. Last time I checked, I was there back in 2018, and they only had epifractan and nothing else in drugstores. Do they have anything else? Because I talked with doctors, local doctors, and they were very, they lacked more options and more concentrations and so on.
Yeah, that is correct. Today, or at least as of last month, I'm not following every day if there's something new. The only things that were available in Uruguayan pharmacies for patients to access through medical prescription was epifractan, that I believe is sold in 3 different concentrations, right? So it's 2, 5, and maybe 10%. I'm not that sure about the 10% one, or a new 10% one formulation is coming. Then there's also 2 creams that are sold over the counter with CBD. That's it. There's the option, probably not used by many patients, of the compassionate use, something similar to what Anvisa allows in Brazil with individual importations. So if you can justify that you do not have access in Uruguay to the medicine that you need, you could import that individually. But again, we are talking, I mean, for THC products, as you know, in Brazil, that is extremely complicated. To get a THC product for an individual patient is super complicated, because where are you gonna get it from? I mean, if it is from Canada, you need a Health Canada permit that costs 600 Canadian dollars. So it is not really viable. It is at least complicated. So not many patients access through THC imported products individually. So but the option is there in theory.
Thanks a lot for the trip around Latin America. We like to
halfway.
Yeah, I know. We did talk about Colombia, Mexico.
Next time we continue with the other ones.
We can do a part 2. You're invited already.
We'll have part 2 coming up soon. I'm just
Sure. Go ahead.
just about that. We're almost, we have 50 minutes already, so there's still time for a final question from Marcelo. The time flies. It's very appreciate all the information that you're bringing in. So let's do this final question with Marcelo, and afterwards we'll go for a round of final remarks. Okay?
Sure. I was gonna bring this question focused in Brazil, but since we were doing this trip in Latin America, and there's still things to talk about on that. Yeah. In bringing all the possibilities that we can talk about Canada, of course, we're more involved in the pharma section here, but as countries are talking more and more about hemp as well, and how do you see, what do you see are the big, you can list the top 3, what will be the big opportunities for Latin America towards cannabis today in your vision, in your particular vision?
Yes, that's a great question for the startups. Startups want to know that.
I would say with the exception of Brazil, Latin America is not really recognized as a continent where the pharmaceutical industry is really developed, right? And let's be honest, it's an agricultural continent. At least that's what has been traditionally the case in Latin America. So I am really happy that so many companies want to become pharmaceutical companies in places like Colombia, Uruguay, Argentina, you name it. And I really wish them success. And I have no reason to believe that they won't be successful. But it's been really hard to be a value-added company in Latin America, especially in the pharmaceutical industry. Again, Brazil being the exception, because you do have a really big national pharmaceutical industry, but I would say it's the exception to the norm in Latin America. But what is common across Latin America? The agricultural power, right? There's no doubt about it. And I'm talking about the possibilities of cannabis also related with the new bill in Brazil. Definitely hemp. If there's one place in the world where hemp can play a big role, that is Latin America. And I hope that will be the case. But then these things start getting confusing, right? So when are we talking about really industrial uses of hemp and the so-called, how many is it? Like 25,000 uses that some people say that hemp could have. And when are we talking about hemp? But what we really mean is that we want to extract CBD to sell it as medical cannabis, right? So that's when things get confusing. And I would say I'm not very popular with this opinion, but I am a hemp skeptic in the case of the real industrial uses of hemp, of these 24,999 uses that are not extracting CBD. I mean, do they exist? Yes, definitely, they exist. But what I see in practice is that in the places where the hemp cultivation is allowed, normally what companies want to do is to extract the flower. unless it's prohibited, like unless it's a country like France, for example, where they can grow the hemp, but they cannot touch the flower, then they do use it for fiber and seed. But in places where they can extract CBD, everyone wants to extract CBD. Like name me a company that is generating meaningful revenue today in cultivating hemp in a country where they can extract the CBD from the hemp plant, and they are generating the revenue with something else. It is very rare to find. It is a real exception. Yeah, like selling the fiber to do clothes. Is it possible? It is possible. It happens. It is a real industry. It is a real possibility. But I normally see that happening in the countries where they cannot touch the flower, like some regions of China or France or whatever. But if you can't use the flower, everyone is going to the CBD, right?
But do you think that's because? But I agree with you, and I imagine that's because today you have over like 115,000 acres of hemp being planted in the U.S. and specialists say that you only needed 20,000 of those because I think they thought it was that gold. The CBD was the gold rush, and everybody just focused on CBD and didn't focus on the 24,999 other possibilities. Do you think that's the way that people are now, since the U.S. it peaked on the production of CBD, they're gonna try pulling that production to other parts of the plant as well, or what do you?
Good point. Maybe there's another thing, right? And that is genetics. And most growers that want to get CBD, they are using genetics that are helpful to get CBD. And I'm by no means an agricultural expert. I know nothing about growing. I cannot even grow a cactus. But if you want to grow hemp for fiber, it's probably going to be a different plant than the one you're growing for CBD. And it probably you will need to get it adapted to the climate. So again, in the case of Brazil, right? You're rightfully saying, let's legalize growing hemp. Like, I mean, why not? I mean, it's plain stupid not to legalize hemp in Brazil, to grow it for the 24,000 uses of the hemp. But then you're gonna need to find the genetics that you can adapt to the specific Brazilian soil, which I imagine is a continental country, has many different types of climates and soils and places where it can be grown. And that also takes time. And probably technology maybe is an issue as well, like technology that allows you to produce at scale and efficiently. For example, like what is one use that is usually or commonly said of hemp? Paper, right? Supposedly, I mean, not supposedly, in reality, you can grow hemp and make paper with that. Have you ever seen a hemp paper? I haven't. I mean, I haven't ever seen a hemp paper. I've seen it in history books, but I never seen one. I've never touched one. So why is that? If it is one of the 24,000 uses of hemp, but I never seen a hemp paper. I want to see one. I'm desperate to see a hemp paper, and probably some company is doing that somewhere. But what is missing for that? So maybe one thing is the focus exclusively on CBD that has been common in the past couple of years. That, as you say, Marcelo, now it's becoming so commoditized that maybe companies start thinking about other niches where they can, for which they can grow and use their hemp. And maybe someone, maybe I really do not know, but I'm just speculating here, but maybe what is needed to have hemp paper is some technology that allows you to transform the plant into paper in an efficient and cost-effective way that can compete with the so-called normal paper, right? The one that comes from the trees. And I really wish that happens. What is needed? Maybe more focus, more technology, and I hope it really happens. I'm not wanting it to happen. I'm just saying that in my experience, what I see is that everyone focuses
on CBD. Exactly. That's what happens right now. Yeah, it's totally that.
Like you said, finding a niche, right? It's always the secret of hempcrete, for example. They figure out the technology to make it happen earlier. Just to name one example. But anyways, I hate to do this really, but for the sake of time, we have almost an hour now. So what I'd like to do is just go around this, like Marcelo said, we can in the near future go for the part 2 with us, Alfredo. You're already invited. Let's make this happen soon, okay? But for this time around, I'll ladies first. I'll bring back Viviane. If you could, please shortly your final remarks, and we'll circle around. And I want to, again, before we end this, thank you again, and consider this team here as your allies in Brazil. Whatever's needed, welcome. We'll make excuses to have you over here as soon as possible.
Thank you, Alex.
It's always nice to learn from you all. Always nice to learn from Alfredo. A lot of information. I was really looking forward to know his view and his studies on Colombia and Mexico. So hopefully next time. And yes, I'll check again your report. Thank you for sending it, and well, for doing it. I mean, this kind of exchange of information is so very important. We do create a lot. I was writing down, I was taking many notes here. So thank you all, and well, let's hope for another one soon.
Daniel, I mean, if we could charge R$1 for each reader, that would be a lot of money, because we have new readers every day for Portal Sechat, and you guys are doing a fantastic work helping to develop this market. Go ahead, please.
It's our main goal, to bring information to help the Brazilians understand more about medicinal cannabis and break the taboos. No, Alfredo, thank you very much. It was nice to talk to you, and I hope we can soon see each other in Brazil or in Las Vegas in your show.
Hopefully both. And thank you, Daniel. The work you're doing is amazing.
Thank you, Alfredo.
Marcello, Italiano, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks again, Alfredo, for being with us, and nice being with you again. I had the opportunity to be with you also in Cartagena and see a lot of the places really quick. I hope we can do this a second time. And the channel is open. Anything you need from us here locally in Brazil as well, you can count on us. And thanks again for being with us.
Floor is yours, Alfredo, please.
Well, obviously, thank you everyone, Alex, Marcelo, Viviane, Daniel, and it's a pleasure being with friends in Brazil. And for me, I'm very happy about the feedback that I receive of the work that I do, but that wouldn't be possible without the local sources, which are like the most important thing for my job. And really, Brazil is a place where I have many really good sources to choose from, where what I've seen, what I perceived is that everyone really wants to genuinely share information, and not necessarily for personal gain, like you should quote me or otherwise I won't tell you what's going on here in Brazil, but really to try to get accurate information out there. Yeah, it's one of the places that I enjoy the most reporting about, among other things, because of the really good people that I know in the country, which obviously includes all of you. Thank you for having me here. Obviously, the other way around as well, anything I can be helpful with to compare, tell the stories of how things have been developing in Europe or other Latin American countries, and try to bring an external view to how Brazil is doing things. I'm always happy to collaborate as well.
Well, thank you, everybody. And with this, we close, we wrap up the 6th edition of Cannabis Thinking Talks with Alfredo Pascual. And please follow us at the Green Hub's YouTube channel. It's all there. Great contents, such as the one that we had today. See you soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.